Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. I am so excited to be talking to you today about a topic that has been growing in my heart and in my work and in my experience for some time now. And this topic today is for the moms out there. But if you're a dad or a grandparent or a caregiver or anyone else interested in supporting our kids right where they're planted, listen in. This idea of the process of growth for moms during the years when we are also raising kids, and let's not mince words here, that is a good part of our adult lives, has just been growing in importance for me as I've become a parent coach, more deeply understood child development and development across the lifespan, really. And let's be real, as I've parented through some pretty tumultuous life experiences myself. And I just don't think we talk about this enough. I think that in our experience as moms, and I'll speak again, I'm going to speak for myself a lot today. Our experience as moms, the focus is on our kids. The focus is on doing the best for our kids. The focus is on showing up for our kids. The focus is on how we respond to our kids and what we strive to do with our kids and for our kids. And don't get me wrong, I am a parent coach for a living. And so literally this is a big piece of what I support parents with and what I support moms with. And what I'm learning is that there's this sense out there that this knowing is hardwired into us as moms, that it becomes so deeply entrenched as part of our identities. And when we become parents, that somehow as our own human, as our own selves, that we're fully formed, meaning that we have ourselves all figured out. And what I have been really pondering and thinking about and exploring with the parents I work with and exploring for myself is we don't have ourselves figured out as we're parenting our kids. Right. And as moms, I feel like we lose ourselves. We become enmeshed as we're supposed to be developmentally for our kids until they're about 2, right? We really literally need to keep our tiny humans alive. And dads, I'm not forgetting about you here. I think that dads likely go through a very similar experience, but also probably somewhat different. And I would love to speak to a dad out there about this. But for today, I'm going to keep it to moms. This one's for the moms out there, the ones who are identifying in that maternal role for kids. And what I really want to do is raise some questions. I want to raise some thought, and I want to raise some conversation about what we're doing in raising ourselves as moms, as we're raising our kids, and what impact that has for our children, what impact that has for their sense of self, for their development, for their attachment patterns and their ability to fully engage in the world. I feel like, it became striking to me, like I've alluded to or talked about many, many times on this podcast, I've now got late teenage young adults. And so, moving through these phases of parenting, these phases of development. And it has become apparent to me from early teens how much my kids were watching, how much they were watching how I shifted and changed. They were watching for my cues of what I did to repair with myself, what I did. And
it struck me that, oh gosh, I can show them and tell them and show up for them. But if I'm not doing it for myself, man, they're getting a mixed message. And then, oh my goodness gracious, how do I do this for myself? Where in the world am I? I've been raising 2 kids for 18 years. Where is doing for myself? Where is myself in all of this? And so the juxtaposition of being in close attachment with your kid and your separate self as a tool for parenting is, I don't know, I think something that's incredibly tender. I think it's something that's incredibly vulnerable. And I think it's incredibly important for us to label as moms. And so some of the things that I want to talk about today, clearly I've got no answers here. I've got some ideas, got some thoughts, got some things I've tried. I've got some things I've supported other moms to try. I don't have any answers to this. I think that development across the lifespan is messy and it's imperfect and it's trial and error. And I think that's the power, is the messiness of it and the ability to keep showing up, even if it's really messy. And so when I think about, how our experience as a human, as a separate human, and our experience as a mom compares and contrasts in development, there's some areas that I really want to just talk about here. So the one that I'm going to start with is maybe sort of a big one, is the idea of anger, the idea of what we're trying to do and teaching our kids anger and regulation, and then what we're doing in our own experience of anger and what that feels like for ourselves. And I'm going to give an example here. When our kids are little and they're, 2 and 3 and they're having those big, messy toddler tantrums, it's their initial experience of anger, right? It's their initial experience of trying to figure out what that emotion of anger means and what it does. Our job, right? Our job as moms is to regulate, to stay calm, to honor the emotion. We've talked about that over and over and over again on this podcast, and to create safety for our kids, emotional safety, physical safety. And, at that age, it's sort of easy to wrap our brains. Well, it's not always easy. Let me be real. It is easier to wrap our brains around like, wow, this is something. And our own experience of like, really feeling angry and frustrated right now that I'm stuck doing this when I really want to go out for a run, or I've got so much work to do, or whatever it might be. As our kids get older, I think that I notice some of us keep our anger pushed down. Some of us, because again, a lot of us were never taught to experience our anger as humans. And so it feels, I think, at least it did to me, like there's not space for it. There's not space to express. There's not space to move through those cycles because we're just spending so much of our time managing our kids, managing their experience of anger and their expression of it. And so as we get into teenage years, where kids are should be able to use their powers for good, be able to use their anger and direct it in some way. That's what we're hoping towards. That's what we're working towards. And gosh, what happens when we haven't yet figured out what to do or how to express ours, and our kids are watching us? I know there have been a couple instances in my parenting where it was appropriate for me to have some anger, where it was appropriate for me, directed, regulated. It was appropriate to me to use that power and that energy in order to really help my kids, truthfully, in a really, really, really challenging circumstance that we were in. And I remember my kids looking at me and saying, Mom, why aren't you angry? And it hit me that I was trying to grow up and learn how to do my own anger while I was trying to help them and support them. And that parallel process really came to light for me, how they were really looking to me in how I was going to deal with anger as an adult. And so it was an experience for me to come into my own. And really, actually, I had to focus on myself and my experience of anger in order to be able to model for my kids what a healthy adult relationship with anger can look like. And for me to model to my kids that I could stand up and take care of myself and them through healthy modulated anger. And holy cow, that was a years long process. That's a work in progress. Nothing's ever perfect. Nothing's ever finished. But thinking back during that time and that realization of, I have to do this for me so I can do it for them. And I've talked to so many moms out there who are just at the beginning of this phase of, I just have to be the everything for my child. And some of the time we have to turn into the everything for ourselves and really protect and honor ourselves because our kids are watching us. And so that's my experience of anger and the idea of taking care of ourselves and learning within ourselves around anger. The next one I want to touch base about, and I want to think about, I'm going to flip the tables completely because that anger one is pretty heavy. It's heavy for me. I know it's heavy for a lot of you all as a mom. There's a lot of internal guilt and shame around it. But I want to flip the tables and I want to talk about our experience of finding independent joy. All right. So what does this mean as a mom? Okay. First of all, I'm just going to say it again. I've said it 1,000 times. No one's got time for that. We're busy. We're literally keeping tiny humans alive. God, all the way up until at least 18. I'm still trying to keep my not so tiny humans, my kiddos that are taller than me now and much stronger than me alive. Some days it feels like. So who's got time for finding independent joy? And what do I mean by independent joy? What I mean by that is I can have joy outside of my child's experience. And I think that this one is tricky because in motherhood, as a mama, we sometimes are able to revel in our children's joy, right? Our children's joy is just it fills us up. It makes us whole. It helps us. It soothes the hard times or the times when we're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do bath time again. And so I think that, when we're really in it, some of us get pretty good at finding that joy through our children. This is the sporting events. If you're a parent who loves going to sporting events, I was not a parent who loved going to sporting events. I went to the sporting events. I did not love it. I did not find joy in it. I found joy in my child's joy, however. But where is your joy that's not connected to your child? Do you have pockets of that, moments of that? Do you even know how you find joy that's not connected to your child or doing for somebody else? What does that even mean? Again, we become parents and we're handed these tiny humans to keep alive. And that's often one of those things that kind of goes right out the door. And then, if you're partnered, you're also trying to figure that out with your partner at the same time, which is a whole other complicating factor. And so I recall thinking it needed to be in the big times. Groups of friends are amazing. Hobbies are great and lovely. The ability to get away, and find some reprieve and some peace is lovely. And I find the experience of centering into, this really gets into embodiment some. I know it's a buzzword, but what feels really good in your body? What sensory experience feels really good for you that isn't created by your child? That isn't because you've supported your child to do something that is truly just yours. I did an episode a few episodes back around, kids leaving the nest. And then they leave the nest and you're left with yourself, right? And that ability to find that independent joy as an adult who's on the other side. You're never on the other side of parenting, but you're on the other side of the intense day in, day out parenting. It's a whole nother world. And so in the tiny moments, so what I mean by tiny moments are the car drive to school to get the kids. I'm talking about the time in the shower or bath. I'm talking about the moments when maybe you're putting the dishes away or in the kitchen. I'm talking about the moments when you're maybe folding the laundry. Those moments that are sort of built into our days that we do anyway. Can we think for ourselves experience for ourselves the moments of tiny joy. I don't know. I don't know if our brains are able to kind of let go of that. I remember thinking about this as my kids got older. They were in their teens and like suddenly like they didn't need me so much. And I was like, now what do I do with myself? And the inclination as a mom is to hold on, right? Is to hold on to those kids because they're your they're your joy, right? And the idea of opening my hand and letting go and seeing what was there and what was exciting to me was terrifying and incredibly freeing. And the kids have said back to me, Mom, it's so cool when you go do XYZ. Or, I think your music is horrible, Mom, but wow, you really love that music. They're watching me find my joy. And in that, they're knowing that they get the individuality to find theirs. They don't need somebody else to tell them what to do or what to be. And so again, it's just a wondering that I have around how we come into ourselves as we're also parenting these kids. A big one that has also popped up for me in this, how we support ourselves as we're supporting our kids is the idea of boundaries and people pleasing. I think it's a little bit the flip side of the same coin. As a mom, I would like to think that I knew where I ended and where my child began, and where my child ended and where I began, which is a physical boundary, right? It's both. It's a physical boundary or a metaphorical boundary. Yeah, I didn't. I'm just not sure that I still do. I'm working on it for a long, long time. And when you really think about, again, parenting and mothering and early attachment patterns and development, literally our job for the first, again, I'm going to say about 2 years, is to meet the needs of our children, right? They have discomfort. We meet the need. We show up, we show up, we show up, we show up. And in that, inherently, it takes some of our boundaries away. Like they're crying in the middle of the night. It's not typically something that we do, is to say, well, my boundary right now is that I'm going to choose to sleep. So if you cry, I'm going to put your earphones in, right? That's just not something we do as parents. We get up and we soothe and we support. And so by default, through the attachment process, our boundaries are crashed a little bit or a lot. By default, we are needing rest and recovery, and we have a, child who we need to physically keep safe. And so like our boundary is crashed. We're not able to get our needs met in the way that I think that is useful for us as individual humans, right? So this is that push and that pull of motherhood. And then like, how do we like grow up for ourselves? We're still developmentally growing in adulthood. How do we do this? So boundaries is another one that I really think about in our coming into our own. What does that mean? And then how does that play against our child's development? And what does that do for our child's development? And I think about, first of all, gaining back the ability to set some boundaries for our time and for our lives and for our choice. Often we can do this in other parts of our life outside of parenting. And I've seen the experience for moms is, it's kind of lost. So it's kind of lost everywhere. It's kind of like lost in relationships. It's lost in work. It's just kind of lost during that time, and getting the ability back to say, you know what? No, I can't give you my time and attention right now. I need to be able to do this for myself. As kids get a little bit older, a little bit more independent, I think that there's some power there for our kids. I think that, as they become teenagers, the ability to say, you know what? I'm going to get to that in 5 minutes. First, I'm going to, whatever it is, I'm going to go listen to this song. I'm going to go lay down for a minute. And then I'll be there for you. I'll be there for you. Is setting a boundary to sort of reclaim ourselves a little bit, right? To come into our own, to find our voice again during that time when we may have felt pretty voiceless for a minute as separate from our kids. It also teaches our kids that it is okay to get your needs met. I remember starting to do this through a lot of work with my children and setting some like, I need some things too here boundaries. I still support and take care of and honor and, all the things. And at first they were like, what? You have your own independent needs and thoughts. And I think, again, modeling that for the kids helps them know how to do it for themselves as they move into adulthood. They didn't, for a long time, they saw a mom who did whatever anybody wanted and did kind of whatever they wanted and then felt frustrated about it and the people pleasing. And then they, in that experience of me growing up as a human, them watching me shift and make a shift kind of set the experience, set the course for how they could do that for themselves as they develop. And so in all of this, I think the other piece that for the moms out there who are like, in the lake, I just see like the chaotic soup of like, what do I do? And how do I do both things? How do I do both things well and in the way I want? I think there's some power in just in sitting with our why, right? Sitting with our why, sitting with our self-compassion about we're still growing up ourselves as we're trying to raise some kids. Man, is it cool that we can model growing up ourselves to our kids. Man, is it great that we can let them see us try and then maybe flounder, maybe make a mistake, and then maybe repair and then maybe try again. That they can experience that and see that and know that we're going to be okay as they move into adulthood and start doing the same thing. And so I think the compassion of knowing that the trajectory is not straight. My new favorite term is the line towards development is not going to be straight. It's going to be very, very curvy. And for some of us, it's going to be even more curvy than others. And curvy means that sometimes it's going to be the way we hope it is. And sometimes we're going to like forget ourselves in it. And sometimes we're going to see ourselves and we're going to be like, oops, that was a little too far. My kids need me a little bit more. As we move towards finding that sweet spot for ourselves, whatever that is for ourselves and coming into our own while we're also raising children. And so clearly there needs to be an episode exploring this same topic with dads. For any of the dads out there listening, I need you. I need somebody to be able to have this conversation with. I would love to explore this same topic from a dad's perspective. And if you are out there and are a single parent, however you define that for yourself, I also see you. This has a couple more layers when you're a single parent, and we are going to, in future episodes, be exploring single parenting a little bit more and protective parenting. And so protective parenting is when you are parenting in a situation where maybe there isn't a co-parent, or maybe there isn't a co-parent who is providing the same emotional safety for your kids that you're able to. And so this is going to be a topic that we talk about quite a bit more. But I just hope that maybe labeling that, gosh, as moms, we're trying to grow up too. And we're trying to parent. And man, this is tricky. Provide some thought, maybe provides just a little bit of a soothing that we're going through this together. And if any of this is striking a chord with you, and you're looking to dig a little bit deeper in order to be the best mom or dad that you can for your kids while also finding your own grounding within yourself, let's spend some time together. You're welcome to take a look at our individual parent coaching courses over at our website, thrivingparentscollective.com. Thank you so much.
Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.